Sonic, Sonic, Sonic. He was everywhere back in the day, even the Super Nintendo, which we are exploring today. If this is your first time here and you want to see regular content on obscure video game history and illegal bootlegs, start now by subscribing and clicking the bell so that you don't miss a thing. While the first Sonic the Hedgehog game was beloved and significantly propelled Sega into the mainstream, many feel the second entry in the series is even better. This brilliant effort introduced faster gameplay, the iconic spin dash maneuver, larger stages, and the globally recognisable Miles Tails Prower. Sonic 2 was a commercial success, selling over 6 million copies worldwide and becoming one of the best-selling games on the Genesis. It was also critically acclaimed, with many reviewers praising its improved graphics, sound and gameplay over the original game. Backed by an aggressive $10 million marketing campaign, it quickly becomes clear why so many people wanted to own this one. And when I say everyone wanted to own this one, I mean everyone, even Nintendo fans. After all, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is a necessity for gracious living. I am Lady Decade and this is the illegal Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Super Nintendo. Obviously not this one, it's for the Mega Drive. Pepsi Cola or Coca-Cola? Star Wars or Star Trek? Israel or Palestine? These are all questions that gamers often ponder. Still, in the early 90s, it was all about Super Mario or Sonic the Hedgehog, even going as far as to influence which console consumers would buy. If you wanted Sonic, you would buy a Sega system. If you wanted Mario, you would grab a Nintendo one. But thanks to the grey market that existed out there, many dubious, unlicensed games would see a release that would allow gamers to play as the company's flagship mascots, but on opposing hardware. Interestingly, like the Sonic 4 release, the same team created both games in question. The previously covered Peru-based Twin Eagles group, who had previously formed coding for the Commodore 64 scene before progressing into the pirate scene, were hacking games primarily for the Super Nintendo. Sadly, although a Twin Eagles game known as Sonic 2 is said to have existed, unfortunately no physical cartridge for the game has surfaced online, and the ROM itself has been wholly lost. But according to Twin Eagles Group, such a game was indeed released and listed amongst hacks they worked on their official website. Fortunately though, the rabbit hole into this obscure content extends deeper. A forum poster by the username of Shoeman Bundy on sonicretro.org would post that they had successfully contacted Mr. Byte, the former leader of Twin Eagles Group, who had confirmed that he had lost the original file. But the story obviously doesn't completely end here. Despite being missing, according to Mr. Byte, he still had the VRAM file from the original artist. According to bootleggames.fandom, these files existed as an ILBM file, an Amiga format. The sprite work has since been reused in a fan-made reconstruction of what is known about the game, thus meaning we can more or less now experience this lost media. So, let's check out some of the gameplay. As you can see, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Super Nintendo plays very little like its licensed Sega Mega Drive counterpart of the same name, and functions entirely differently too. Still, this is an extremely solid platformer in its own right, and features fantastic, energetic music. Sonic can use a bloody sword in combat and even take to the skies using a jetpack. This one is genuinely awesome. But how much credit can we give the Twin Eagles Group for this? Well, not that much really, but credit where credit is due. The Sonic the Hedgehog sprite animations they made are indeed excellent, appearing highly expressive and not even remotely out of place in this game. But what's for the brilliant little title which clearly isn't a Sonic game? Well, suppose you don't already know what this game is automatically from this experience. In that case, you might recognise many of the mechanics from another game that this game is also similar to. I refer to the excellent Konami-produced Rocket Knight Adventures, a famous entry amongst the Sega Mega Drive library. Rocket Knight Adventures, starring Sparkster, would get a sequel simply titled Sparkster, which saw release on both the Mega Drive and Super Nintendo. But all the more interesting is that both Sparksters for both of the systems are entirely different games. In the Super Nintendo release, which the Sonic hack we are spotlighting today is based on, players control a rocket-powered opossum named Sparkster, who is on a mission to stop the evil army of Generalissimo Lionheart from taking over his home kingdom. The game features side-scrolling levels filled with enemies, traps and obstacles the player must navigate while collecting power-ups and defeating bosses. One of the main features of Sparkster is his rocket pack, which allows him to fly and attack enemies. The controls can be tricky at first, but once you get used to them, they are very satisfying. The game also has some puzzle elements where the player must figure out how to progress through certain areas. The graphics and music in Sparkster are top notch for the Super Nintendo, with colourful and detailed sprites and backgrounds, and an upbeat and catchy soundtrack. The game also has a good level of challenge, with later levels becoming tricky, but not so much as frustrating. Sparkster is a fun and well-designed platformer worth checking out if you enjoy games of this genre. It's not as well known as some other games from its era, but it's worth playing if you can get your hands on a copy. So, Sparkster is fantastic, but should Sonic really carry a sword? Just seems so off-brand. With this illegal version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 being created in 1998, Sonic carrying a sword was indeed pretty weird. But as you likely know, it would only be a matter of time until Sonic holding a massive blade became canon. 11 years after the release of the illegal Sonic 2 for the Super Nintendo, Sonic players would get an official Sonic game made for Nintendo hardware where Sonic would indeed carry a sword. This 2009 effort for the Nintendo Wii was insanely set in the world of King Arthur, which is much more out of place for the blue RNA seed than chucking him into the world of Sparkster. So, was this nonsense inspired by the Twin Eagle Group produced hack? Well, it's highly improbable, and more likely simply a case of Sonic Team wanting to make another game where players could swing the Wii remote around like an absolute nutter. As one might expect, the odd concept paired with shoddy gameplay meant that Sonic and the Black Knight would be exceptionally poorly received by critics. So if you must play a Sonic game where the character wields a sword, I strongly urge you to play the Sparkster hack instead. As for the Sparkster / Rocket Knight adventure games of the 90s, sadly, despite the success of the first two games, Konami did not produce any more Sparkster games until 2010, when a new game titled Rocket Knight was released for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 and PC. This game served as a reboot of the series with updated graphics and gameplay mechanics, but it did not achieve the same level of success as the original games. Sparkster for many remains remembered as a beloved character and series from the 16-bit era of gaming, with the SNES version being a significant part of that legacy, even if some gamers instead experience his greatness through the lens of Sonic the Hedgehog. Regarding this infamous hack, some physical copies of this bootleg game have to be floating around somewhere, right? So let me know below if you own this lost media. Both 16-bit Sonic and Sparkster are fantastic, so whether you play the hack or the source material it is based on, you are certainly in for a treat. If you enjoyed this one, don't forget to subscribe for more content on bootlegs and obscure gaming history, and watch my upload on the illegal Sonic the Hedgehog 4 for the Super Nintendo right now.